Okay, so this is going to be a brief primer. Should be about 45 minutes, give or take. And pretty much is going to give an overview of coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19. Coronavirus is just the family of viruses. SARS-CoV-2 is the official name of the coronavirus. That is the novel coronavirus that's afflicting us today. And then COVID-19 is the actual disease, right, that the virus causes. And this is just a primer and some dietary recommendations. And the reason why this presentation is being put together is because our consultants who officially went through all their training and paperwork training and did their phone calls and everything like that initially, they're about to be dispatched. And one of the major things that we're facing in the realm of health is coronavirus, right? COVID-19. So a lot of requests are coming in from potential clients who need and want consultations and or regimens in regards to COVID-19. And we want to be able to provide them a proactive alternative, right? This is not a replacement for anything that's recommended to you by your physician. Whoever your primary care physician is your primary care physician. What we're simply doing is providing education and information. And that's what this is for. With this information, you can apply it as you see fit, but we always recommend that you consult with your primary care physician and any specialist that you're working with, okay? Pulmonary specialist or whoever the case may be, all right? So I want to welcome those who are here right now with us. So I want to say, peace to Juanita, Kakum, Sister Shamira, Shalom, and Megan. KB, I see he just jumped in as well. And I want to say thank you guys for heeding the call and looking at the push notification that went out to everybody to join the session. So I ask everybody to please mute your mics. Yep, keep your mics muted. And I'm going to go into this. So there may be some things that I say that may be kind of technical, and that's fine. If I say it and you don't know what it is that I'm talking about, feel free to jot a note down and ask me after the fact. I'll try to break stuff down as much as I can as I'm going through it, but I don't want to do it too much because it'll lengthen the time of the presentation, okay? But this is pretty much going to give you an overview of what coronavirus is. The material that I'm utilizing, because, I was going to do it off the cuff. However, I want to ensure that everything that I say is coming from a well peer-reviewed source from experts in the field. All right, so I'll be citing information or quoting information pretty much from a lot of these sources. I use 5 articles in regards to piecing together or piecemealing together information that I'm going to present to you on tonight. All of these documents, for those of you who are our consultants, will be uploaded. Matter of fact, I started uploading about 4 of them already in the Naturopathic Eating Consultants group. So several of these documents are up, and I'll put the rest of them up there before the end of the evening. All right, so that way you can see the references to the information I'm sharing with you on tonight. All right, and again, if you have any questions, you can just reserve them towards the end of the presentation, and I'll be more than happy to do that. But after we give you a primer, we're going to give you the dietary recommendations. So those of you who are not consultants yet, or who are not interested in being consultant, but just are interested in this type of information, we're going to give you free game on tonight. All right, to kind of help you and others out that who are suffering from this ailment and definitely need some relief. And we're going to provide it to you from the naturopathic realm, if that's something that you would like to consider. All right. All right. So we're going to go over a couple of things. Before I do, I just want to make sure that everybody here is aware of who I am. Shalom, I'm DivineProspect. I'm a holistic health enthusiast, a naturopathic educator and lecturer, and a THD at Kingdom Harbinger Ministries. All right. So I've been in the realm of naturopathy for about 10 years. I've been in this way of life. And the reason why I ventured here is because I had several health ailments that I was suffering from. More particularly, it was asthma, allergies, and eczema. And these are things that I've suffered from, off and on throughout my lifetime. And I'm going to my primary care physician, who would only recommend me to a specialist, dermatologist, ENT, et cetera, pulmonary specialist, or whatever the case may be, in regards to my health matters, and realizing that they never fixed the problem. All they pretty much did was patch everything up, with prescription medication and maybe some basic home remedies and stuff like that. But it was nothing that actually got to the root of the ailment that I was suffering from. And because of that, I decided to take matters in my own hands by researching the diseases that they said that I had, and doing some experimentation to see what worked on me and what didn't through trial and error. And I found solutions that allow me to manage and or uproot the actual ailments that I was suffering from. And I provided my finds to the specialists who examined me and showed, exceptional progress. And they were, interested in how I came about it, and I explained it to them. And they were amazed that I took them, matters in my own hands and decided to take care of myself. And since I haven't been back to one of those specialists, right? I go to a primary care physician for checkups, but haven't been back to a specialist in I don't know how long, right? Because I'm either able to manage things when they get out of control and or uproot the root cause of the issue, right? And that's why I'm in it and teaching, what I'm teaching, because I believe that naturopathy is one of the most exceptional ways to holistically look at health and wellness, and it provides an ample amount of solutions by way of verified peer-reviewed data that exists from people in the field. And I believe that the more people are able to educate themselves on the things that are going on, the more that they can be proactive in regards to their health, and they're not wholly dependent upon another individual to take care of all their health needs, because all of us have a responsibility to take care of our health and ensure that our family, children, extended family and community knows how to take care of themselves when epidemics, pandemics, et cetera, come on the rise. And as you know, from the social climate on today and the medical climate on today, that is coronavirus and as the pathogen that makes way for COVID-19, the disease. All right. Okay. With that being said, I'm gonna give an introduction on coronavirus. Okay. So that way you are aware of what coronavirus is. And again, like I said, if anything that I say is too technical, if I can break something down, I will. But for the sake of time, I will not be breaking everything down, but feel free to take some notes. I'm going to try to talk at an even pace so that way you can hear what it is that I'm saying and be able to follow along what's being said. And this way to make it easy for you to jot down notes. Sometimes I talk pretty quick, and that's because I'm from New York. That's how we are where I'm from. I've been learning over time that I have to pace myself and slow things down, because everybody's mind may not be able to process things as quickly as mine. And sometimes, you think I speak fast, but if you can just imagine the amount of information in my head that's trying to run out, I'm not speaking fast enough. But in regards to this, I will take my time, pace it out. And if you have any questions, please write down your notes, and I'll do my best to address it after the presentation. All right. All right, so looking at the introduction, so coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, the highly contagious viral illness caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2, has had a catastrophic effect on the world's demographics, resulting in more than 3.8 million deaths worldwide, emerging as the most consequential global health crisis since the era of the influenza pandemic of 1918. After the first cases of this predominantly respiratory viral illness were first reported in Wuhan, Hubei province, China in the late December 2019, SARS-CoV-2 rapidly disseminated across the world in a short span of time, compelling the World Health Organization to declare it as a global pandemic on March 11, 2020. Since being declared a global pandemic, COVID-19 has ravaged many countries worldwide and has overwhelmed many healthcare systems. The pandemic has also resulted in the loss of livelihoods due to prolonged shutdowns, which have had a rippling effect on the global economy. Even though substantial progress in clinical research has led to a better understanding of SARS-CoV-2 and the management of COVID-19, limiting the continuing spread of the virus and its variants led to a better understanding of SARS-CoV-2 and the management of COVID-19, limiting the continuing spread of this virus and its variants has become an issue of increasing concern. As SARS-CoV-2 continues to wreak havoc across the world, with many countries enduring a second or third wave of outbreaks of this viral illness attributed mainly due to the emergence of mutant variants of the virus. Like the RNA viruses, SARS-CoV-2, while adapting to their new human host, is prone to genetic evolution with the development of mutations over time, resulting in mutant variants that may have different characteristics than its ancestral strains. Several variants of SARS-CoV-2 SARS-CoV-2 have been described during the course of this pandemic, among which only a few are considered variants of concern, VOCs, which means variants of concerns, by the World Health Organization, given their impact on global public health. Based on the recent epidemiological update by the World Health Organization as of June 22nd, 2021, 4 SARS-CoV-2 VOCs have been identified since the beginning of the pandemic. The alpha strain B117, first variant of concern described in the United Kingdom in late December 2020. Beta strain B1351, first reported in South Africa in December 2020. Gamma P1, first reported in Brazil in early January 2021. And Delta variant B16172, first reported in India in December of 2020. All right. So we're going to move on here. I'm just going to show you this overall, but we're going to get into it a little deeper when we touch on the etiology. But this is at a microscopic level what the coronavirus looks like, or SARS-CoV-2 looks like. It's made up of 4 main proteins, and there's other accessory proteins, which are smaller proteins that we're not going to hone in on today. But the major proteins you see here is your spike protein, which is your S protein, spike glycoprotein, your E, which is your envelope protein, your M, which is your membrane protein, and then you have your RNA genome, which you see right there inside. So technically, these elements are the main components necessary for attachment, entry, and infection, right? And replication and budding, right? That then turns into a new virion and then goes throughout the body. Okay. All right. So let's move forward. So now we're going to deal with the etiology. For those of you who don't know what the etiology is, it's the cause, set of causes, or manner of causation of a disease or condition. Okay. All right. So coronaviruses, COVs, are positive stranded RNA plus ssRNA viruses with a crown-like appearance on the electron microscope. Coronam is the Latin term for crown, due to the presence of spike glycoproteins on the envelope. The subfamily Orthocoronavirinae of the Coronavirinae Viridae, family classifies into 4 genera of COVs: the alpha coronavirus, which is alpha COV, the beta coronaviruses, beta COV, the delta coronaviruses, delta COV, and the gamma coronavirus, which is gamma COV. All right. Beta COV is further divided into 5 subgenera or lineages. All right. Genomic characterization has shown that bats and rodents are the probable gene sources of alpha COVs and beta COVs. On the contrary, avian species seem to represent the gene sources of the delta COVs and gamma COVs. COV has become the major pathogens of emergent respiratory disease outbreaks. Members of this large family of viruses can cause respiratory, enteric, hepatic, and neurological diseases in different animal species, including camels, cattle, cats, and bats. For reasons yet to be explained, these viruses can cross species barriers and can cause, in humans, illness ranging from the common cold to more severe diseases such as MERS and SARS. To date, 7 human COVs, H-COVs, capable of infecting humans have been identified. Some of the H-COVs were identified in the mid-1960s, while others were only detected in the new millennium. In general, estimates suggest that 2% of the population are healthy carriers of a COV, and that these viruses are responsible for about 5% to 10% of acute respiratory infections. All right. SARS-CoV-2 is a novel beta COV belonging to the same subgenus as the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, or SARS-CoV, and the Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus, or MERS-CoV, which has been previously implicated in SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV epidemics with mortality rates up to 10% and 35% respectively. It has a round or elliptic and often pleomorphic form and a diameter of approximately 60 to 140 nanometers. Like other COVs, it is sensitive to ultraviolet rays and heat. This is why you heard them say, hey, when the summer comes, it's going to die out. In this regard, although high temperature decreases the replication of any species of virus, Currently, the inactivation temperature of SARS-CoV-2 must be well elucidated. It appears that the virus can be inactivated at about 27 degrees Celsius. Conversely, it may resist lower temperatures even below 0 degrees Celsius. Also, these viruses can be effectively inactivated by lipid solvents, including ether, 75% ethanol, chlorine-containing disinfectant, peroxyacetic acid or acetic acid, and chloroform, except for chlorhexidine. Genomic characterization of the new H-cov isolated from a cluster patient with atypical pneumonia after visiting Wuhan had 89% nucleotide identity with bat SARS-like CoV VZXC21 and 82% with that of human SARS-CoV. Hence, it was termed SARS-CoV-2 by experts of the International Committee on the Taxonomy of Viruses. The single-stranded RNA genome of SARS-CoV-2 contains 29,891 nucleotides encoding for 9,860 amino acids. All right. Although the origin of SARS-CoV-2 is currently unknown, it is widely postulated to have originated from an animal implicating zoonotic transmission, which means zoonotic transmission is when something leapfrogs from one species to another. All right, those type of viruses, right? And then a lot of times you have a vector animal or animal that is the carrier of the virus before it is transmitted to a new host, okay? The genomic comparison between the human SARS-CoV-2 sequence and known animal coronaviruses indeed reveal high homology, 96% between the SARS-CoV-2 and the beta-cov RATG13 of bats. Similar to SARS and MERS, it has been hypothesized that SARS-CoV-2 advanced from bats to intermediate hosts, such as pangolins and minks, and then to humans. A recently released report by the WHO describing the possible origins of SARS-CoV-2 was inconclusive, as it did not clearly specify the origin of the virus. However, it did report that the circulation of SARS-CoV-2 occurred as early as December 2019. This report explored several possible hypotheses of the origin of the virus that included the origin of the virus in an animal, the transmission of the virus to an intermediate host, and the subsequent passage into humans. All right, and that's an overview of the etiology of the virus, okay? And if you want to look at visuals of what it is we're talking about, so here you see a SARS-like bat corona, I'm showing you there. It shows you the spike proteins in the envelope, okay? And then we'll talk on the ACE2 receptors, which are receptors on human cells that allow attachment and entry into the cell, okay? Can somebody mute their mic? Somebody's mic is not muted. Can somebody mute your mic or mute your phone? Let me see if I could do it. Okay, I did it. All right, let me go back to it. Okay. All right, so you see here on the left, the viral proteins, which are the ones that I summed up for you earlier. The S proteins determine virus host range and mediate virus cell fusion. So over time, through various mutations, what you'll get is the spike, the S-glycoprotein, we call the glycoprotein, which is the spike that ventures out of the membrane of the virus, is the thing that makes attachment to various receptors on the cells of various organs, et cetera, right? And the mutations on it determines which cells it can actually bind to and which cells it can gain entry into, okay? The M proteins are the transmembrane proteins for transport of nutrients. So once you have the binding and entry, what happens is the glycoproteins no longer need it. So that part falls off. And what happens is the membrane portion that contains the other proteins makes its way into the cell, right? The envelope proteins are from binding and penetration. So they assist with those processes. And E and M proteins is the ancillary proteins for immunoresponses, right? They cause the body to respond to the virus that's in there, okay? So what you have is your binding phase, right? Your attachment and binding phase, and then your invasion and fusion phase, your replication phase, assembly and release, and infection. Okay, those are the phases of coronavirus, or what we say the COVID-19 is really the symptoms for the pathology of this particular virus. All right. Over on the right is the host factors. And again, we're going to touch on a little bit of this in a second. SARS-CoV-2 receptor, ACE, right? The receptors that's on the surface of cells that allow binding and attachment and entry. Age people, over 65 age is more susceptible. It's an ongoing medical condition. A cytopathic effect or cytokine storm occurs in the lungs, in the alveoli sacs, which we'll go in a moment as well. The body gives an inflammatory response to that. Hypertension, shocking syndrome, because the body's overwhelmed. Pulmonary disorders, diabetes, metabolic disorders, respiratory disease, and multiple organ failures, right? So all these things are what occur eventually to people who meet their demise in regards to COVID-19, all right? Okay, so let's move forward. All right. So there's another interesting component to this is the racial and ethnic disparities in COVID-19, right? The severity of infection and mortality related to COVID-19 also varies between different ethnic groups. Racial and ethnic minority groups were reported to have a higher percentage of COVID-19 related hospitalizations than white patients based on a recent CDC analysis of hospitalizations from a large administrative database that included approximately 300,000 COVID-19 patients hospitalized from March 2020 to December 2020. This high percentage of COVID-19 related hospitalizations among racial and ethnic groups was driven by a higher risk for exposure to SARS-CoV-2 and an increased risk for developing severe COVID-19 disease. The results of a meta-analysis of 50 studies from the US and UK researchers noted that people of Black, Hispanic, and Asian ethnic minority groups are at increased risk of contracting and dying from COVID-19 infection. COVID-19 related deaths were the highest among Hispanic persons. Another analysis by the CDC evaluating the risk of COVID-19 among sexual minority adults reported that underlying medical comorbidities, which increased the risk of developing severe COVID-19, were more prevalent in sexual minority individuals than heterosexual individuals, both within the general population and within specific racial ethnic groups. All right. And that's something key to note, because a lot of the political agendas online to get people vaccinated was based on these studies and why they wanted to have the highest concentration of vaccines in minority communities. Okay. All right. So we're going to go into the pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2. All right. The beginning of how this thing becomes bad, right? Pathos from the Greek and Genesis, beginning of it being bad. Okay. So structurally and phylogenetically, SARS-CoV-2 is similar to SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV and is composed of four main structural proteins, which we address, right? The S spike protein, the envelope protein, which is part of the glycoprotein, the nucleocapsid, which is the N protein, the M protein, along with 16 non-structural proteins and 5 to 8 accessory proteins. The surface spike glycoprotein, which resembles a crown, is located on the outer surface of the virion, SARS-CoV-2, gains entry into the host cells by binding the SARS-CoV-2 spike or S protein to the ACE2 receptors abundantly on respiratory epithelium, such as the type 2 alveolar epithelial cells, right? And we're going to address that. Besides the respiratory epithelium, ACE2 receptors are also expressed by other organs such as the upper esophagus, enterocytes from the ileum, the myocardial cells, the proximal tubular cells of the kidneys, and the urothelial cells of the bladder. In summary, the spike RBD allows the binding to ACE2 receptor in the lungs and other tissues. The spike protein of an amino acid site, a polybasic site, allows the functional processing of the same by the human enzyme furin or protease. And that's going to come up in a bit and later, okay? This process enables the exposure of the fusion sequences and therefore the fusion of the viral and cell membranes, a necessary passage for the virus to enter the cell, all right? And that's the pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2, okay? All right, and if you look here on the screen, this is pretty much breaking it down for you. All right. SARS-CoV-2, the binding and viral entry via membrane fusion and endocytosis. Endocytosis is how the cell pulls the virus in and puts it in a vacuole. Okay. And then once in the cytoplasm of the cell, right, it shows you here the ribosome, right, the release of viral genome, right. So the RNA genome is then released. it goes to what's called a viral polymerase, which is the translation of the viral polymerase protein. The RNA replication then occurs, right? The RNA genome, and then the genomic and subgenomic RNA plus sense, right? And then you see that process of entry, the process of translation, replication, and then from there, we go to your subgenomic or nested transcription, right? And this is all ways in which you have the RNA, which is responsible for copying things such as DNA and RNA itself and keeping the data in a particular format. The virus has taken over the assembly factory of the cell, right, via the ribosome. And then from there, we get the translation of viral structural protein. So now it's assembling itself, all right? And then you'll see here the SE and M proteins combined with the nucleocapsid, and here it is taking all those proteins and putting it into a membrane, and then it matures in the formation of a new virion that looks like the parent is there. Now, sometimes you may have some mutations, and because viruses are not very efficient in the sense of maintaining its RNA or even DNA integrity over time. So there are minute mutations that occur, and this is how you get your subsequent variants, okay? And then from there, it buds out of the cell via exocytosis, and it goes looking for more host cells, okay? All right, so before we get to this section, I'm going to read off another part here. It says the effects of SARS-CoV-2. Let me go back for a second. The effects of SARS-CoV-2 on the respiratory system, the pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2 induced pneumonia, because most people who die of COVID-19 is based on complications of pneumonia occurring, okay? COVID-19 is primarily considered a viral respiratory illness as its causative agent. SARS-CoV-2 predominantly targets the respiratory system. The pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2 induced pneumonia is best explained by two stages, an early and late phase. The early phase is characterized by viral replication, resulting in direct virus-mediated tissue damage, which is followed by a late phase when the infected host cells trigger an immune response with the recruitment of T cells, monocytes, and neutrophils, which releases cytokines such as tumor necrosis factor A, granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor, GM-CSF, interleukin-1, interleukin-6, interleukin-1b, interleukin-8, interleukin-12, and interferon, IFN. In severe COVID-19, immune systems overactivation results in a cytokine storm characterized by the release of high levels of cytokines, especially interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha A, into the circulation, causing a local and systemic inflammatory response. All right. And that from that level is how you get the collapse of the lungs, because of the weight that then turns into the alveoli sacs. And your alveoli sacs, and you mentioned that a bit earlier, are responsible for trapping oxygen and transfusing oxygen to host what we call them, red blood cells, host red blood cells that then use hemoglobin to attach to the oxygen and then delivers it to the organs of your body that needs oxygen. Okay. And that's very important, right? So what happens is when you have T cells, you have monocytes, and you have neutrophils, which are all specialized white blood cells that are going to respond to this infection, they send out what's called cytokines. And these cytokines are things that they cause the body to produce to respond to these things. But because of their overactivation of these signaling, what we want to call messengers or proteins, if you want to call it for lack of a better word, but due to the overactivation of it, what occurs is that now you have situations where those alveoli sacs are impacted because of this cytokine storm, and therefore it collapses on itself. And if your alveoli are collapsed and filling up with mucus, no oxygen can pass through there. And guess what? You're going to die, because the body's not going to have any oxygen. You're going to die from hypoxia, and that's the end of you. Okay. So that's what happens on a technical scale at that lower level and how it impacts people right now. The mortality rate of the virus is very low. of the amount of people that get it. However, people who are immune compromised, people with underlying conditions, etc., are more susceptible, and in the elderly are more susceptible for that actual collapse of the alveolar sacs and that cytokine storm to take effect, and the body pretty much will die off of there through hypoxia or other organ injuries and failures. Okay. All right. So from there, I'm going to move on to the next part, which is medicinal plants for viral respiratory infections, right? So the key thing is, now that we learned a little bit about the virus and what the virus does, what the virus is, now how do you respond to this, right? So what we simply want to do by providing you the educational part of the lecture and telling you what this virus is and what the disease is, now we're going to give you the informative part, where we want to let you know that there are what we call naturopathic remedies that can be applied to help the body in being resilient against the virus, fortifying the body, etc. Now, in no way are we saying this is a cure to the virus or to the disease called COVID-19. We're not claiming a cure at all. However, this is a way that you can implement prophylaxis, or a way of putting through preventive medicine. So that way you can shield your body from a successful infection, or you can deduce or minimize the degree of infection so that your immune system has time to respond and clear the virus out before you die, right? Because that can happen if the immune system is not able to do so, right? And we want to derive these sources from natural sources in nature, right? But we also have to understand the mechanism of action, the minute components within these plant-based products, or the phytochemicals responsible for affecting the infection of what we call coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2, right? And we're going to go over that in a second. And then from there, we're going to give you some dietary suggestions that you can implement to fortify your body from getting sick from the disease, or if you have the disease, how to better manage it, right? Until your body is able to clear the infection, okay? All right, so we're going to go into it, right? So viral respiratory infections, VRI, continue to be among the most common human illnesses. Antiviral plants have much to offer for patients with the acute bronchitis, acute respiratory syndrome, common cold, influenza, and viral pharyngitis, right? Among these antiviral plants, there are many plants studied for their activity against respiratory viruses. These herbal medicines have been used to treat viral flu caused by influenza virus, human respiratory human respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, and notably during the previous epidemics of this century, such as the two coronavirus outbreaks, SARS-CoV in 2002 and SARS-CoV in 2012. Convincingly, there are numerous herbs that have been shown to have a strong anti-VRI activity. Among these antiviral herbs, those specifically important to mention are the anti-coronavirus medicinal plants. Plant extracts can be useful against COVID-19 because it belongs to the beta genus of coronavirus and is thus closely related to the previous coronaviruses against which these plants have shown potent activity. There is a whole list of herbs assessed for their activity against SARS-CoV-2 viruses, all right? Bioactive metabolites that are in phytochemicals, right, can thwart the various development of stages of coronaviruses. And this is the important thing. Once you understand the various stages of the development of the infection, successful infection, you want to be able to consume items that have components that are antiviral and that they interfere with various stages of development. Right. And then this is the thing, understanding the mechanism of action and how this occurs. Now, there are 3 tables that I would like to show you, but because I have to go to the site and bring it out, I'm going to save those links for our consultants and share it with them. Anybody else who's interested in that, at the in the description box of this actual video, we'll have all the links for you, right? All the links so you can look at everything that I'm saying to you right now. Okay. But I want to show you something, right? And right here, these are plant-derived components, potential drug candidates for COVID-19, okay? And what happens is you have a medicinal plant, and it goes to a particular process where they're able to isolate and concentrate the phytochemical, which is the active molecule responsible for acting on various stages of development of the viral infection, okay? In the case of SARS-CoV-2, The initial stage, the stage that people who are interested in prophylaxis or preventive medicine or preventive measures, right? You want to be able to intake items that can inhibit the viral attachment. If you can fortify the body with active molecules coming derived from phytochemicals that can prevent the virus from attaching and binding to the cell surface or your ACE2 receptor, then guess what? That virion will stay in the body, exposed. The white blood cells will catch wind of it and destroy it and clear it out. And you will never have a infection, a true infection. Okay. So you want to fortify your body with items that can prevent the attachment and binding of the virus on your ACE2 receptor that is on the cells of organs we mentioned earlier. Okay. The second stage is, remember, we mentioned the translation of the viral polymerase protein, or the RDRP, which the ribosome uses. And the ribosome is the responsibility of cleaving your mRNA, messenger RNA. So you want to have a phytochemical that, if there is a translation that occurs, it inhibits the replication, because you need to duplicate these things over time. So you can also have a phytochemical that goes inside the cell intakes, and prevents that part of the RNA replication from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay. And then now you have the other subsequent stages where phytochemicals can also affect things, right? You can have a phytochemical binding pocket, right, which interferes with the replication process, right? You can also have a phytochemical that interferes with the release of the virus outside the cell, right? Exocytosis, where it prevents the virion from attaching to the membrane once it's fully assembled, budding, and being released, right, to infect another cell. So these plant-derived compounds affects the replication, the translation, the attachment, the release of the virus in various ways. So whenever you want to take in any kind of plant items, that has antiviral constituents that can fight against coronavirus, understand the mechanism of action, right? How does it commence these processes that prevents the virus from having large-scale infection and transmission throughout your body? Okay, so we're going to go over a few of those in a second. And this is where we're going to learn why the things that we've taught our consultants in their formal classes, why it was important for them to understand these things, because it's viable in using it to consult with others in regards to how we are advising you from a naturopathic best practices stance on how to combat the virus. Okay, so from there, we're going to move on to nutrient supplements. Okay. So the most momentous weapon against any kind of viral infection is a strong immune system. Okay. There are plenty of studies done in the past that suggest an imperative role of trace elements and vitamins in normal performance of the immune system. Furthermore, there are reports of elevated resistance to viral infection in response to their supplementation. Vitamin D and A ingestion increase the humoral immunity in association with influenza vaccine in pediatric patients. Exogenous supplementation of SE has been shown to affirmatively combat influenza infection in alliance with the vaccination. Apart from this, wide range of herbals, nutraceuticals, and probiotics have been found to be effective against viral infestations and stimulation of immune responses. Okay, so vitamin A, which is one of the vitamins, is an essential fat-soluble vitamin which has a major involvement in regulating vision, growth, and maturity, as well as protection of the mucosal and epithelium integrity of the human body. Now, remember, these epithelium is an overlay onto the cell lining or the wall lining. And this has several features, right, in protection of the body. It's also lined with the mucus, right? A lot of people say, oh, you got to get all the mucus out of your body to be healthy. That's not true, because if you don't have mucus in your body, you will die. Can somebody mute their mic? Somebody's mic is Let's open again. All right, thank you. All right. So whoops, let me go back. There we go. So vitamin A is responsible for the integrity of that lining, right? That mucosal lining, to ensure that it's intact. Well, if you are deficient in vitamin A, then your mucosal lining, especially the one lining your bronchial tubes, right, and your esophagus, you'll be compromised and allow viral infestation. Okay. It has a crucial participation in elevating the immunomodulatory responses and dogmatic functions in humoral as well as cellular responses. The vitamin A supplements given to the infants with measles and rabies showed impending improvement in antibiotic response in association with the vaccinations. Vitamin D, another fat-soluble vitamin, has a vital role in regulating the adaptive and innate immune responses. More recently, a study carried out revealed that supplementation with high dose of vitamin D, 2,000 IUs a day, in contrast to a standard dose, 400 IU a day, had no significant effect on a viral infection in upper respiratory tract. However, the 1/3 of the population was found to have vitamin D levels less than 30 ng/ml milliliters, right? Similarly, another study suggests vitamin D supplementation with influenza vaccine resulted in enhancement in the levels of TGF beta in the plasma, which further indicated that vitamin D directs the lymphocytes polarization towards the tolerogenic immune response. Vitamin D has also been affirmed to demonstrate beneficial effect against other viruses, including HCV infection, XCV genotype 2 to 3. Another report which suggests antiviral capability of vitamin D was elucidated. It was further affirmed that vitamin D was potent in reducing the hazards associated with viral pandemics. The high dose of vitamin D reduced the hazard of several chronic ailments such as cardiovascular diseases, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, cancers, and respiratory tract infection. Respiratory tract infection is the key. Grant and co-workers additionally revealed that vitamin D lowers the risk of respiratory tract infections by sustaining tight junction, decline in the synthesis of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Remember, that's the thing that causes that cytokine storm when that happens, and killing the envelope of virus via inductions of defensins and cathelicidin. Consequently, the risk of cytokine storm is lowered, which prevents pneumonia, right? This is simply just vitamin A and vitamin D. And if you know, most African Americans are deficient in vitamin D. Okay, this is why it correlates with the data that they have of the most COVID-19 hospitalizations are minority groups. Okay, vitamin E is also a fat-soluble vital and has an antioxidant potential and regulates the host's immune responses. The positive effect of vitamin E against chronic hepatitis was reported. They suggested appreciable elevation and normalization of liver enzyme activity and HBV DNA negativization. Another vitamin that acts as an important antioxidant and enzymatic cofactor is vitamin C. It acts as a cofactor in varied physiological processes such as hormone synthesis, immune potentiation, and collagen synthesis. The meta-analysis role of vitamin C in treatment and preventions of common colds was carried out. It was concluded in the view of evidences that vitamin C megadose show reduction in the frequency of common cold in the community. All right. Let's see what else. Additionally, different plant-based sources of vitamins include mushrooms, carrots, broccoli, almonds, citrus, guava, amla, avocados, etc. Describes the roles of vitamins A, C, E, D in combating COVID-19. Let me see if I have that up here. No, that one is missing. Another slide is missing. Give me 1 second. Let me add that. I want you to visually see this as a summary visually of what I'm talking about. So just give me 1 second. We see it says vitamin A, essential fat soluble vitamin, right? Elevates the immunomodulatory modulatory response, improvement in dogmatic functions such as humoral, which has to do with your hormones, and cellular response, antiviral action when supplemented along with vaccinations, right? So they're saying even if you're vaccinated, that does not mean that you should avoid taking vitamins, okay? Because you have more efficacy when you get your daily value percentage of vitamins, whether you're vaccinated or not, okay? Vitamin C, vital water soluble vitamin, right? Antioxidative potential and acts as an enzymatic cofactor, modulation of various physiological processes such as hormone synthesis, immune potentiation. That means how great your immune system can expand, right? And respond, right? And collagen synthesis, all right? Vitamin E is an essential fat soluble vitamin. Vitamin E, in comparison to other vitamins, has higher antioxidative potential and regulatory effect the host immune system. Okay, so it helps to regulate your immune responses. Vitamin D is an essential fat soluble vitamin, regulates the adaptive and innate immune responses, enhancement in levels of TGF beta in the plasma, lymphocytes polarization towards tolerogenic immune responses, decline in synthesis of pro-inflammatory cytokine levels, and induction of defensins and cathelicidins that rupture the virus envelope, which means it acts on the virus itself and ruptures its envelope. And once the envelope is ruptured, all of the internals of the virus spills out into the immune system, and then you have your macrophages, your neutrophils, your monocytes, etc., that come and clean up the mess. Okay, and if you're getting your daily value percentage of vitamin A, C, E, and D, you enhance your immune response against COVID-19. All right, and that's key. Okay, that's very important. Okay. So aside from your vitamins and other minerals, right, we didn't get to touch on, which is zinc, magnesium, iron, etc. These items also assist in the potentiality of your immune system, right, and the efficacy of your immune system, because these are all vital elements that are necessary in order for your immune system to operate normally, okay, and have a quick response to anything foreign that's in the body, any pathogen that shows up in the body, okay. All right. So polyphenols and other plant-based solutions. So in conjunction with vitamins and minerals, getting your daily value percentage of vitamins and minerals that you should be getting from your diet, the foods that you eat every day. Sometimes people are unable to get it from their food. So that's why multivitamins are created. All right. We're going to touch on a little bit of that later as we wrap up. But there's another element of plant-derived phytochemicals that can assist in interfering with those various stages of infection of the virus, right? And they're in the form of what's called polyphenols. And we're going to touch on that and other plant-based solutions as well. All right. And we're going to touch on that right now. Okay. So polyphenols, right? In coronaviruses, the S protein is the sole viral membrane protein responsible for cell entry. It defines viral tropism by its receptor specificity and membrane fusion activity during virus entry into cells. Drugs targeting SARS-CoV-2 or phytochemicals targeting SARS-CoV-2 spike protein impede spike-mediated membrane fusion and prevent virus entry into the host cell. These therapeutic agents include vaccines, antibodies, small interfering RNAs, peptides, non-peptidic small molecules such as polyphenols. Lutein, quercetin inhibited SARS-CoV infection by preventing virus entry. It was recently suggested that dietary intake of resveratrol and a polyphenol found at high concentrations in the skin of red wine grapes could modulate SARS-CoV-2 disease severity by regulating AC2 expression and function. Rodents fed with a high-fat diet supplemented with resveratrol have shown upregulated ACE2 expression and increased ACE2 protein levels compared to rodents fed a high-fat diet alone. Several publications have also reported that curcumin targeted the angiotensin system by regulating angiotensin 2 levels in mice. These results suggest a potential for polyphenols to modulate the severity of COVID-19 symptoms through modulation of ACE2 abundance. Therefore, polyphenols may reduce SARS-CoV-2 viral infection by binding to the ACE2 receptor, preventing the cell entry, and modulate the severity of lung injury associated with COVID-19 by regulating ACE2 expression. However, it is important to note that given ACE2 pivotal role and physiopathological processes, targeting the enzyme still needs careful evaluation to ensure the benefit-risk balance is favorable, all right? And all of this is there to say that polyphenols can interfere. These are minute constituents derived from, like we mentioned earlier, red wine grapes, right? That interferes with the binding process and helps to regulate the expression of ACE2. And if you're able to regulate the expression of ACE2, which are the receptors that's on the cell walls, then what you could do is you can minimize the binding process, even if it's not interfered, right? How it expresses itself, how much of it expresses itself, etc. Okay. Polyphenols inhibiting SARS-CoV-2 viral proteases, right? Protease inhibitors have been developed to stop the spread of viruses that cause diseases such as HIV, AIDS, MERS, and SARS. Thus, drugs inhibiting viral proteases are also suggested to be good candidates to hinder SARS-CoV-2 life cycle. So a protease is any enzyme that synthesizes proteins, okay? And all of that is necessary for the virus to replicate, okay? Replication of coronavirus requires correct proteolytic processing of the replicase polyproteins by viral proteases, leading to the release of non-structural and structural proteins. All right. SARS-CoV-2 polyproteins are processed by main protease 3CL-Pro, also known as MPRO, and by papin-like proteases, PL-Pro. These proteases are involved in the replication and transcription of the SARS-CoV-2, especially 3CL-Pro, which plays a vital role in polyprotein processing and virus maturation. Hence, 3CL-Pro is one of SARS-CoV-2 best characterized targets, and studies have shown that development of antiviral agents targeting 3CL-Pro could provide an effective first line of defense against coronavirus infections. Natural compound inhibitors of SARS-CoV proteases include amides, flavonoids, and coumarins. Right? Inhibition of C3CL-Pro was shown in silico and in vitro with ipilgallocatechin gallate, IC50, gallocatechin gallate, and quercetin. All right. So the key takeaways is quercetin, which we're going to focus on in the next few slides. All right. So looking at these items, right, and how its mechanism of action acts upon the various stages of the infection of the virus and development of the virus and the transcription, replication, the exocytosis, the virus leaving, the binding of the ACE2 receptors, etc. These are novel approaches that we can get from out of a diet that is rich in polyphenols that can actually assist us in combating this virus, right? Whether it's through preventive medicine or while we have the virus, how to cope through the virus, okay? All right, so this takes us to our last slide. All right. And then from here, we should be done, and I'll open it up for Q&A. And again, some things I said were a bit technical. If you have any questions on any of that, I can try my best to break it down for you in the limited amount of time that we have. If not, you can ask me offline and I can assist you with that. And again, all the references to the things I'm speaking on today will be in the description of this video. Also, if those of you who are consultants, it will be in a consultant group as well. Okay. All right, so resveratrol, you can get that in high abundance. Now, again, it is a highly dense form of polyphenols, and you can get it in abundance in blackberries, blueberries, cranberries, red grapes, and pistachios, okay? So if we were to give dietary recommendations and we wanted to give you something that has a high concentration of polyphenols, then it would be resveratrol, and it would be a diet that is rich in blueberries, cranberries, red grapes, and pistachios, okay? Also quercetin, right? I didn't get into much detail on the mechanism of action for quercetin. I touched on it slightly, that and curcumin, but I didn't go too deep into it. However, if you want to get quercetin in high levels, kale, broccoli, and apples, especially apple skin, are the best source of quercetin. And you can also get it via third-party supplements, right? Same thing with resveratrol. You can get that through third-party supplementation as well. For curcumin, you want to get your turmeric root. All right, you can get turmeric root tea, or you can actually get the turmeric root yourself, chop it up, put it in a blender, and make a smoothie out of it. All right, as well as these other items. So what I typically do is at least twice a week, I try to get a smoothie going on with all of these ingredients, as many of these ingredients as possible, and take it as a concoction to prevent me from getting a full-on infection of COVID-19. Now, I have not been vaccinated. And I've been healthy this whole time. I've never succumbed to any symptoms of COVID-19 or any infection of coronavirus because I take heed to these things that I'm sharing with you now as a form of prophylaxis, right? And again, What we're giving is just suggestions and recommendations, right? With this information, you take it to your primary care physician, talk it over with them, and you make the best suggestions, right? But this is just information, so that way you know how to be proactive, right, in protecting yourself. Because some people do not want to go to the allopathic doctor, and they want to rely on naturopathic means. So if you're going to do so, this is a good point of reference. However, we're not saying this is going to cure anything. Okay. It just gives you a fighting chance that you need proactively against the virus. Okay. Now, also, there's something else I'm going to suggest once I'm done with this. And those of you who are our Patreon members, our consultants, and our paid KHM members will all get access to a database that I will show you shortly, that you can then take these ingredients, plug it into that site, and that site will give you all of the data that you need to know about that particular item. And this database is consulted by allopathic doctors as well when they give you any kind of recommendations. You know, some people say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That's the age-old adage or idiom that used to be expressed. Well, there are things like pectin and the skin of apples that contain quercetin that actually can help prevent certain infections and actually keep the doctor away. But doctors then go back and reference this database to see the most up-to-date scientific journals, medical articles, etc., on this particular item to see if they can still recommend it to patients. Okay. All right. So a cough expectorant. So a cough expectorant and a cough suppressant, they do two different things. Okay. Your cough expectorant brings out excess mucus. So it does not stop you from coughing, but it brings out excess mucus, right? Cough suppressants, they ease the cough reflex. All right. Now, what you essentially want to do if you are suffering from any kind of respiratory ailment or illness, pneumonia, bronchitis, or whatever the case may be, if you have a wet cough where there is excessive mucus coming out, well, what you want to do is you want to take cough expectorants to get that excess mucus out. So that way the body has normal mucosal levels. And then once that's done, you want to get cough suppressants. So that way you can ease the cough reflex and prevent that dry cough. So if you have a dry cough, you definitely want to get a cough suppressant. If you have a wet cough, you want to get a cough expectorant and then follow up with a cough suppressant if it turns into a dry cough. Okay. So some of the top three cough expectorants that I would recommend is licorice root, manuka honey, and ivy leaf. If you go to CVS, if you go to a Walgreens or a pharmacy of that type, and you look for naturopathic or homeopathic items, you'll see a lot of these ingredients in there. All right. For a cough expectorant. Okay. Now, good cough suppressants is elderberry syrup, marshmallow roots, and ginger root tea. All right. Elderberry syrup is best to get it if it's straight from the elderberries itself. Okay. Same thing with marshmallow root, but you can get that in a tea, an organic tea form, and ginger root tea, you can get that in an organic format as well. And these will help to suppress the coughs because of their mechanisms of action. I could unpack that for each item, but we'd be here all day. So that's why I'm going to give you the website so that you can plug these things into the website. The website will break everything down to you so you understand its mode of action, its mechanism of action, any adverse effects from it, any documentation from peer-reviewed scientific journals and articles on the efficacy of this item in regards to the things you want to use it for, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now, also, you want what's called immunomodulators, right? Immunomodulators are important because they help to enable the immune system to have a more proactive response to any kind of viral agents or pathogens or antigens that make it into the body. Okay. So a good source of these is brown seaweed, and its constituent phytochemical is polysaccharide. A saccharide is a simple sugar. Poly means multi simple sugars that make up polysaccharides, or they are a form of glucose. All right, is the item that in the brown seaweed is responsible for inducing immune response and allowing the body to respond appropriately to any pathogens, whether bacterial, fungus, or viral related, into the body. Reishi mushroom also does something similar. And nutritional yeast extract, or any kind of yeast that has beta-glucans. Most yeast have beta-glucans. Beta-glucans also do the same thing. They induce a healthy immune response, so the body can respond accordingly to any kind of infections that it engages in. Okay. Now, you also must keep your lungs healthy. And some good items for that is fenugreek, mullein tea, and an item called pneumotrophin PMG. Now, for the immunomodulators, I would also recommend something called Cogniplex and or Immunoplex. So Immunoplex, you want to take that when you don't have any symptoms, and that helps to give you a standardized regulation of your immune system. Cogniplex, you take that on the onset of symptoms from any kind of viral infection or bacterial infection, and therefore it will boost your immune system so that way it can respond accordingly. Okay. Now, in lung health, fenugreek, mullein tea, and Neutrophin PMG do several things. All right. They open the lungs, they ease spasms, tightness, and cough, and they soothe irritation and dryness. They help to ensure that the lining in your bronchial tubes integrity is not compromised, and that the body and the lungs is operating optimally, right? And that's the goal, right? That's what fenugreek, mullein tea, and pneumotrophin PMG does. So pneumotrophin PMG, Immuplex, and Congleplex are all created by a company called, a company called, wow, how did I just forget this? This is crazy.
Standard Process.
Thank you. Standard Processes. They also make MediHerb as well. Standard Processes is one of my favorite companies that produces products that efficacy is so potent that in some states and areas and places, a doctor has to prescribe it. But these are all natural items, right? They can also be purchased over the counter from Amazon. All right. And if you look at any reviews on their products, it's normally like 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's a remarkably excellent product that I highly recommend for every and anybody to include into their diet, right? In means of supplementation. And they do a multitude of different things, okay? Pneumotropin typically focuses on the lungs. And what it does is that it's a concept that was created called like heals like. That means what they do is they give you the mineral blueprint of a lung cell from bovine cells, which are cells from cows. And what happens is when you intake that, the body through the GI tract, through absorbability, we went over this in our early classes for the consultants. It takes it and it brings it to that particular organ, and it gives the organ a mineral blueprint to rebuild healthy organs, because at the core of almost all mammals, we all share the exoskeleton mineral blueprint for the design of organs. The only thing is that through differentiation via, what we call stem cells, through differentiation of the type of animal it is, hormones, etc., it turns into a organ for a pig or for a goat or for a cow or for a human. So it's an incredible technology that they discovered that actually helps to repair organ functionality. And this one works on the lungs. Okay. And now, lastly, we have a supplement. If you want to get any supplements that have these ingredients or that also contain your vitamin minerals that we mentioned earlier, you want to get a whole food. I put whole foods, but I meant to pay whole food organic multivitamin supplement. Whole food means it's derived only from food sources. It's not created synthetically in a lab. It's from whole food sources, and it's organic, which means they're not GMO'd in any way, right? And you want to go with a company that is able to control the entire manufacturing process from the farm all the way into the tablet form. Okay. And there's several companies that do that. And if those of you who want those recommendations, we will put them in the description box, and the consultants, you will be equipped with this information when you consult with the clients. Okay. All right. So with that, that is the end of our presentation. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up for Q&A. If anybody has any questions, any comments, any statements, this will be your opportunity to do so. All right. Now, after this video is over, the video will only be available to our consultants, to our KHM members, and to our Patreon. Right. If you're in any of those 3 categories, you will get access to this recording, and that way you can utilize it as you see fit. All right. So the floor is open to anybody have any questions or comments or statements, etc.